Linda Harris woke up at 5:15 a.m. every weekday morning, as she had for 18 years. She'd shower, dress in her school district uniform, grab coffee and a granola bar, and be at the bus depot by 6 a.m. to start her pre-trip inspection of Bus 47. Driving a school bus wasn't glamorous work, but Linda loved it. She loved the kids, their energy, their chatter, their excitement about school or dread depending on the day. She loved feeling like she was part of their daily routine, a stable presence in their young lives. Some of these kids she'd been driving since kindergarten. Now they were in middle school. Linda's route covered a suburban Atlanta neighborhood, mostly middle-class families, modest homes, quiet streets. She had 37 regular students, ranging from kindergarten through 8th grade. She knew most of them by name, knew their personalities, knew which ones were morning people and which ones were grumpy until third period. This particular Wednesday morning in October started like any other. Linda completed her inspection, started her route, and began picking up students at designated stops. First stop, the Martinez family. 3 kids: Carmen, 5th grade, Miguel, 3rd grade, and little Sophia, kindergarten. They climbed aboard, Carmen helping Sophia find a seat. Second stop, the Anderson twins, Kyle and Kayla, both 7th graders, arguing about something as usual. Third stop, several kids, including Jordan Wright, a 6-year-old 1st grader. Jordan was small for his age, quiet, always polite. "Good morning, Miss Linda," he said softly as he climbed the stairs. "Good morning, Jordan. How are you today?" "Fine, ma'am." Jordan walked down the aisle and took his usual seat about halfway back, near the window. Linda watched him in her rearview mirror as she pulled away from the stop. He looked tired, she noticed. Dark circles under his eyes. The route continued. More stops, more kids, the bus filling with the familiar chaos of children heading to school. Linda navigated traffic, enforced her rules, stay seated, keep voices down, be kind to each other, and kept an eye on her passengers through the large rearview mirror mounted above the windshield. That mirror was essential for bus safety. It allowed Linda to see the entire length of the bus, to monitor student behavior, to ensure everyone was seated safely. Over 18 years, Linda had become adept at watching the road ahead while simultaneously monitoring the mirror, catching problems before they escalated. About 10 minutes into the drive, Linda glanced in the mirror and saw something that made her heart stop. Jordan Wright, the quiet 6-year-old, had pulled up the back of his shirt and was showing another student, Marcus, a 2nd grader, who sat near him, what looked like marks on his back. Even from the mirror's distance, Linda could see dark lines crisscrossing Jordan's small back. Welts, bruises, the unmistakable pattern of being struck repeatedly with something, probably a belt based on the linear marks. Marcus's eyes were wide, clearly shocked by what he was seeing. Jordan pulled his shirt back down quickly and said something Linda couldn't hear from the front of the bus. Linda's breath caught. 18 years of driving school buses meant 18 years of mandatory training on recognizing and reporting child abuse. She knew what she was seeing. Those weren't accidental injuries. Those were deliberate inflicted wounds. Someone had beaten this 6-year-old child badly enough to leave marks that were still visible days later. Linda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her mind raced. She needed to do something now, but she was driving a bus full of children. She couldn't stop in the middle of the road. She couldn't confront Jordan in front of all the other students. She needed to handle this carefully but urgently. Linda made a decision. She pulled the bus over to the side of the road, put on her hazard lights, and picked up her radio to call dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Bus 47. I have a situation. I need supervisor and police response at my current location. I have a child safety concern that requires immediate attention." The kids started murmuring, confused about why they'd stopped. Linda stood and turned to face them. "Everyone stay seated and quiet. We're going to wait here for just a few minutes. Everything is fine, but I need you all to stay in your seats and be calm." She walked down the aisle toward Jordan, who looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. He knew she'd seen. Linda knelt beside his seat, keeping her voice gentle and quiet. "Jordan, honey, I need you to come up to the front of the bus with me for a minute, okay? You're not in trouble. I just need to talk to you." Jordan's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know you didn't, sweetheart. You're not in trouble at all. I just need to talk to you privately. Will you come with me?" Jordan nodded and followed Linda to the front of the bus, away from the other students' hearing. Linda sat in the driver's seat and had Jordan stand beside her. "Jordan, I saw you show Marcus something on your back. Can you tell me what those marks are from?" Jordan's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "I can't tell. I'll get in worse trouble. Daddy said if I ever tell anyone he'll hurt me worse. Linda felt cold fury rising, but kept her voice gentle. Jordan, listen to me carefully. Those marks on your back, did your daddy do that to you? Jordan nodded, crying silently. When did it happen? Last night. I spilled juice at dinner. He got mad. He made me take off my shirt and he hit me with his belt. A lot of times. It hurt so bad, Miss Linda. Linda felt tears in her own eyes but maintained composure. Jordan, you are so brave for telling me, and I promise you, I'm going to make sure you're safe. Your daddy is never going to hurt you again. But he said. I know what he said. But he was wrong. What he did to you is not okay. It's not your fault. And there are people whose job is to protect children. They're going to help you, okay? Within 5 minutes, a supervisor's vehicle and an Atlanta police cruiser arrived. Officer James Parker and his partner, Officer Maria Santos, boarded the bus. Linda met them at the front and quietly explained what she'd witnessed and what Jordan had disclosed. The officers immediately called for a detective from the child abuse unit and for backup to transport the other students safely to school on another bus. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived 20 minutes later. She was experienced, patient, and specialized in child abuse cases. She spoke with Jordan on the bus while the other children were transferred to another vehicle to continue to school. Jordan, with Linda sitting beside him for support, told Detective Mitchell everything. His father, Kenneth Wright, beat him regularly for minor infractions, spilling things, making noise, not eating fast enough, leaving toys out. Last night's beating had been the worst yet. Kenneth had hit Jordan with a belt over 20 times, leaving deep welts across his back, buttocks, and legs. Does your daddy hurt you in other ways? Detective Mitchell asked gently. Jordan nodded. Sometimes he chokes me. Sometimes he locks me in the closet. Sometimes he doesn't let me eat dinner. And he says mean things. He says I'm bad. He says I'm stupid. He says he wishes I was never born. Mitchell documented everything while Officer Santos photographed Jordan's injuries with his consent. The marks were extensive, linear welts in various stages of healing, suggesting repeated beatings over time. This wasn't a one-time loss of control. This was systematic abuse. Jordan, you're not going to school today, Detective Mitchell explained. We're going to take you somewhere safe, and we're going to make sure your daddy can't hurt you anymore. Is that okay? Jordan looked at Linda with frightened eyes. Will you come with me? Linda's heart broke. I can't come with you, honey, because I have to keep driving the bus for the other kids. But these police officers are going to take very good care of you. Detective Mitchell is really nice, and she's going to make sure you're safe. I promise. Jordan hugged Linda, sobbing. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for seeing. Linda hugged him back, tears streaming down her own face. You're so welcome, sweetheart. You're so brave. Detective Sarah Mitchell had worked child abuse cases for 8 years and thought she'd seen everything. But Jordan Wright's case was particularly enraging. A 6-year-old beaten so severely and so regularly that he had injuries in multiple stages of healing across his back and legs. Jordan was taken to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for medical examination and treatment. Dr. Patricia Lee, a pediatrician specializing in child abuse cases, documented over 30 distinct injury marks on Jordan's small body. The injuries ranged from fresh welts from the previous night to older scars from beatings weeks or months earlier. This child has been systematically physically abused for an extended period, Dr. Lee told Detective Mitchell. Based on the pattern and age of injuries, I'd estimate he's been experiencing regular beatings for at least 6 months to a year, possibly longer. Is he medically stable? Physically, he'll heal. The welts will fade. But psychologically, this level of abuse causes profound trauma. He'll need extensive therapy and support. Jordan was placed in emergency foster care with a family experienced in caring for abused children while the investigation continued. Meanwhile, Detective Mitchell and her team moved quickly to build a case against Kenneth Wright. They interviewed Jordan's mother, Patricia Wright, who worked as a nurse and had apparently been unaware of the extent of abuse. Or claimed to be unaware. Mitchell had learned that sometimes non-abusing parents genuinely didn't know, while others turned a blind eye. Kenneth disciplines Jordan, Patricia said carefully when interviewed. He believes in strict rules and consequences, but I didn't know he was beating him like this. Kenneth would spank Jordan sometimes when I wasn't home, but I thought it was normal spanking, not this. Did you ever see marks or bruises on Jordan? Patricia looked guilty. Sometimes, but Kenneth would say Jordan fell or roughhoused with other kids, and Jordan never said anything. He never told me his father was beating him. Children often don't tell the non-abusing parent because they're too scared or they've been threatened. Did your husband ever threaten Jordan about keeping quiet? I don't know. I work night shifts 3 days a week. Kenneth would handle bedtime routines and discipline when I wasn't home. I trusted him. Patricia started crying. How could I not know this was happening? How could I not protect my own child? Detective Mitchell had heard this before. The guilt and self-recrimination of parents who'd failed to see abuse happening under their noses. Mrs. Wright, abusers are often very good at hiding their behavior. They abuse when the other parent isn't around. They threaten victims into silence. They provide explanations for injuries. It's not always obvious. But Mitchell also knew that sometimes parents chose not to see what was right in front of them. Patricia's level of awareness would be investigated as part of determining Jordan's future placement. Police arrested Kenneth Wright at his workplace. He was an accountant for a mid-sized firm. Kenneth was shocked and indignant when officers arrived. "What is this about? I haven't done anything." "Mr. Wright, you're under arrest for child abuse. Your son Jordan has disclosed ongoing physical abuse, and medical evidence supports his statements. You have the right to remain silent." Kenneth's face cycled through emotions: surprise, anger, calculation. Jordan is lying. He's a troubled child. He makes up stories. This is ridiculous. But at his house, police found the belt Kenneth had used, still sitting on his dresser, with what appeared to be blood on the leather. They found Jordan's bedroom with a lock on the outside of the door. They found notebooks where Kenneth had documented Jordan's infractions and punishments, a disturbing record of systematic abuse spanning over a year. The case against Kenneth Wright was overwhelming. As the investigation progressed, a disturbing pattern emerged. Jordan Wright had been showing signs of abuse for over a year, signs that teachers, staff, and other adults at his school had apparently missed or ignored. Detective Mitchell obtained Jordan's school records. In the past year, the school nurse had treated him 3 times for injuries. September, bruises on his arms. Jordan said he fell off his bike. December, marks on his legs. Jordan said he got scratched by bushes. March, bruises on his back. Jordan said he fell downstairs. Each time, the nurse had documented the injuries and Jordan's explanations, but hadn't reported suspicions to Child Protective Services. Why? Mitchell interviewed the school nurse, Helen Rodriguez. "Did these injuries concern you?" "Of course they concerned me, but Jordan always had explanations. And I'm not a doctor or investigator. I documented what I saw and what he told me." "Did you ever suspect abuse?" Helen hesitated. "I wondered. The frequency of injuries seemed unusual. But Jordan was always polite, well-dressed, had good grades. His parents seemed involved. I didn't have proof anything was wrong." "You're a mandatory reporter. You're not required to have proof, just reasonable suspicion." 3 separate incidents of unexplained injuries on a 6-year-old constitutes reasonable suspicion. Helen looked guilty. "I should have reported. I know that now. I talked myself out of it each time. I told myself kids get hurt playing. I told myself I could be wrong. I didn't want to cause trouble for a family if I was overreacting." This failure to report wasn't just the nurses. Jordan's first-grade teacher, Mrs. Amanda Stevens, had also noticed concerning signs: Jordan flinching when she made sudden movements, wearing long sleeves even on hot days, seeming tired and distracted, occasionally having visible bruises. "I noticed," Mrs. Stevens admitted when interviewed. "I noticed Jordan seemed scared sometimes. I noticed he'd wear long sleeves in warm weather. I noticed bruises, but I convinced myself it was nothing. I told myself kids bruise easily. I told myself his parents seemed nice and normal. I didn't want to believe a child in my class was being abused." The school counselor, David Park, had met with Jordan twice at Mrs. Stevens' request because Jordan seemed withdrawn and anxious, but Kenneth Wright had attended those meetings and dominated the conversation, explaining that Jordan was shy and sensitive, and that they were working on building his confidence at home. "I should have insisted on speaking with Jordan privately," Park said, his guilt evident. "But Mr. Wright was so involved, so articulate about his son's needs. He seemed like a caring, engaged father. I didn't recognize it as controlling behavior masking abuse." Multiple adults at Jordan's school had noticed concerning signs. Multiple adults had opportunities to report suspicions. None had. And Jordan had suffered ongoing abuse as a result. "This is a systemic failure," Detective Mitchell told her captain. "Not just one person missing signs, but multiple trained professionals choosing not to report concerns. This child went to school every day with marks of abuse, and no one acted to protect him until a bus driver noticed and immediately reported." The school district launched an investigation into why mandatory reporting protocols hadn't been followed. The district superintendent publicly acknowledged failure to protect Jordan and committed to comprehensive retraining of all staff on recognizing and reporting abuse. But for Jordan, that retraining came too late. He'd suffered an additional year of abuse because the adults who should have protected him chose not to get involved. Kenneth Wright's trial began 6 months after his arrest. He'd hired an expensive defense attorney who attempted to paint him as a strict but loving father whose discipline had been misunderstood. Mr. Wright used corporal punishment, which is legal in Georgia, the defense attorney argued. He spanked his son when Jordan misbehaved. "That's not abuse, that's parenting. The state is criminalizing normal discipline." But the prosecution had overwhelming evidence. Jordan's testimony about systematic beatings, choking, food deprivation, and emotional abuse, medical evidence showing over 30 injury marks in various stages of healing, the belt found at Kenneth's house with blood on it, Kenneth's notebooks documenting punishments, the lock on Jordan's bedroom door, testimony from Linda Harris about what she'd witnessed, evidence that Kenneth had threatened Jordan into silence. The prosecutor, District Attorney Michael Johnson, systematically demolished the defense's arguments.
This was not discipline. This was torture of a 6-year-old child. Mr. Wright beat his son with a belt over 20 times for spilling juice. He choked him. He locked him in closets. He denied him food. He told him he wished he was never born. This is systematic, intentional abuse designed to dominate and terrorize a child. Jordan, now 7, testified with remarkable bravery. He described years of abuse, the beatings, the choking, the verbal cruelty, the constant fear. He showed the jury photographs of his injuries. "Why didn't you tell anyone at school?" the prosecutor asked gently. "Because Daddy said if I ever told he'd hurt me worse. He said no one would believe me. He said I'd get taken away and put somewhere bad. I was too scared to tell." "What made you show Marcus your injuries on the bus?" "I don't know. Marcus is nice to me. I wanted someone to see. I wanted help, but I was too scared to ask for it. When Ms. Linda pulled over the bus, I knew she'd seen. I was scared but also relieved, like maybe finally someone would help me." Linda Harris testified about what she'd witnessed in her rearview mirror, and her immediate response. "I saw Jordan showing another child what appeared to be welts and bruises on his back. Based on my training and 18 years of experience transporting children, I immediately recognized those as signs of abuse. I pulled over, called for help, and spoke with Jordan privately. He disclosed ongoing physical abuse by his father. I stayed with him until police arrived. As a mandatory reporter, and as someone who cares about children, I had an obligation to act immediately. I would do the same thing again without hesitation." The school nurse, teacher, and counselor, who had failed to report their suspicions, also testified, not for the defense but as part of establishing the pattern of abuse and the failure of systems to protect Jordan. "I regret not reporting my concerns," Helen Rodriguez, the school nurse, testified. "I saw injuries multiple times. I documented them. But I didn't report to Child Protective Services because I talked myself out of believing it was abuse. That was a failure on my part. Jordan suffered additional abuse because I didn't act. I have to live with that." The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts, multiple counts of child abuse, aggravated assault, cruelty to children, and false imprisonment. Kenneth Wright showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but when sentencing came 2 weeks later, his mask slipped. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. At sentencing, Jordan provided a victim impact statement, read by the prosecutor because Jordan was too young to address the court directly. "My daddy hurt me a lot. He hit me and choked me and said mean things. I was scared all the time. I couldn't tell anyone because he said he'd hurt me worse. Then Miss Linda saw my back on the bus. She helped me. She made me safe. I'm not scared anymore. I'm living with a nice family. I'm going to a new school. I'm happy now. I want my daddy to know that what he did was wrong and it hurt me, but I'm going to be okay because people helped me." Judge Patricia Morrison, known for being tough on child abusers, addressed Kenneth Wright directly. "You systematically tortured a defenseless 6-year-old child who depended on you for safety and care. You beat him, terrorized him, and psychologically destroyed him. The only reason he's alive and beginning to heal is because a bus driver happened to notice and had the courage to act. You deserve every day of the 25 years you'll spend in prison." Jordan Wright remained in foster care with Susan and James Mitchell, an experienced couple who specialized in caring for traumatized children. They provided stability, safety, and patience as Jordan began the long process of healing. Jordan's recovery was complicated. Years of abuse had left deep psychological scars. He had nightmares. He flinched when adults raised their voices. He hoarded food in his room because he'd been denied meals as punishment. He struggled to trust adults. He had anxiety and depression, but he also had support. His foster parents, a skilled trauma therapist named Dr. Rachel Foster, and eventually a supportive school environment with teachers trained in trauma-informed education. Jordan experienced ongoing trauma from age 5 to 6, critical developmental years, Dr. Foster explained to his foster parents. The abuse shaped how his brain developed, how he views the world, how he relates to others. Recovery isn't quick or linear. It's going to take years of consistent support, safety, and therapy. But children are resilient. With proper care, Jordan can heal and thrive. Slowly, Jordan did begin to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. His anxiety decreased. He started trusting his foster parents. He made friends at his new school. He stopped hoarding food. He smiled and laughed, things he'd rarely done while living with Kenneth. One significant part of Jordan's healing was maintaining contact with Linda Harris, the bus driver who'd saved him. With Dr. Foster's guidance and approval, Linda visited Jordan regularly at his foster home. "You're my hero," Jordan told Linda during one visit. "You saw me when I needed someone to see me. You saved me." Linda hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You saved yourself, Jordan. You were brave enough to show Marcus your injuries. That took courage. I just happened to see and I did what any adult should do. I made sure you got help. But you believed me right away. You didn't say I was lying. You didn't send me home. You protected me. Because you were telling the truth, sweetheart. And because protecting children is the most important thing adults can do. You deserve to be protected." Every child does. Linda and Jordan maintained a relationship over the years. Linda became a positive adult figure in his life, someone who represented safety and protection rather than fear and violence. Jordan's mother, Patricia, after completing parenting classes and therapy, was eventually allowed supervised visitation with Jordan. She'd divorced Kenneth and was working to rebuild her relationship with her son, though it was slow and difficult. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you," Patricia told Jordan during one supervised visit. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have kept you safe. That was my job and I failed." Jordan, now 8 and in therapy, therapy, responded with maturity beyond his years. Dr. Foster says it wasn't your fault that Daddy hurt me. That was Daddy's choice. But she also says you should have noticed and helped me. I'm mad that you didn't, but I'm trying to forgive you because you're trying to be better now. The relationship between Jordan and Patricia remained complicated, but there was hope for eventual reconciliation. Jordan's case sparked significant changes in how the Atlanta School District approached child abuse recognition and reporting. The failures by school staff, the nurse, teacher, and counselor who'd noticed concerning signs but hadn't reported, were widely publicized and criticized. The district superintendent, Dr. Richard Martinez, publicly acknowledged systemic failures. Multiple staff members noticed concerning signs with Jordan Wright but failed to report them to Child Protective Services as required by mandatory reporting laws. This represented a catastrophic failure to protect a vulnerable child. We take full responsibility and are implementing immediate reforms. Those reforms included clear protocols for reporting suspicions. When in doubt, report. Elimination of barriers to reporting. Staff no longer needed administrator approval to report. Protection for staff who report in good faith. No retaliation even if report is unfounded. Regular audits of injury documentation to identify patterns. Partnership with Child Protective Services for consultation on concerning cases. The training specifically addressed why people fail to report despite noticing concerning signs. Fear of being wrong and causing trouble for innocent families. Assuming someone else will report. Believing they need proof rather than just suspicion. Not recognizing the signs as abuse, being manipulated by charming, articulate abusers, workplace cultures that discourage reporting. We need to create a culture where erring on the side of protecting children is the norm. Dr. Martinez told staff at a training session, if you're wrong and a family is unnecessarily investigated, that's unfortunate but manageable. But if you don't report and a child continues being abused or dies, that's catastrophic and irreversible. Always report suspicions. Let trained investigators determine if abuse is occurring. Linda Harris was invited to speak at these training sessions, sharing her experience with Jordan. I'm not a teacher or counselor, I'm a bus driver. But I've had training on recognizing abuse, and I pay attention to the kids I transport. When I saw Jordan's injuries in my mirror, I didn't hesitate. I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't worry about being wrong. I pulled over immediately and called for help. That's what saved Jordan. Immediate action. If I'd waited, if I'd convinced myself it was nothing, if I'd decided it wasn't my business, Jordan would have gone home that day and been beaten again for showing someone his injuries. Her testimony was powerful. You don't need to be certain something's wrong. You just need reasonable concern. Jordan came to school with visible injuries multiple times. That's reasonable concern. That should have been reported every single time. The fact that it wasn't is why he suffered an additional year of abuse. Don't make that mistake. If something seems wrong, report it. Immediately, without hesitation. You could save a child's life. The reforms were implemented district-wide and eventually became a model for other school districts across Georgia and nationally. Within 3 years, the changes led to a 156% increase in child abuse reports from Atlanta schools. Not because abuse had increased, but because it was finally being recognized and reported.
Linda Harris, initially uncomfortable with attention, became an unexpected advocate for child abuse recognition training for school transportation staff. She'd been doing her job, she'd say when reporters called. But child welfare organizations recognized that bus drivers were uniquely positioned to observe children in ways others couldn't during the commute, away from school and parental supervision. In a setting where kids sometimes let their guard down, bus drivers see kids twice a day, every school day. Linda explained at a transportation safety conference she'd been invited to speak at. We see them tired in the morning, energized or exhausted in the afternoon. We see them interact with peers. We see their physical condition. We see patterns. And critically, we have mirrors that let us observe without children realizing we're watching. That's how I saw Jordan's injuries in my rearview mirror when he thought no one was looking. Linda worked with the Georgia Department of Education and the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services to develop specialized training for bus drivers on recognizing child abuse and neglect. The training covered physical indicators, unexplained injuries, poor hygiene, inappropriate clothing for weather, behavioral indicators, fear of going home, aggressive or withdrawn behavior, age-inappropriate sexual knowledge, how to document observation, mandatory reporting requirements and procedures, how to respond when a child discloses abuse, understanding trauma and its effects on behavior, using mirrors and observation skills effectively. Bus drivers already use their mirrors for safety, to watch for traffic, to monitor student behavior. Linda told training audiences, this just adds another dimension, watching for signs that a child might be in danger at home. You're not investigating, you're not diagnosing, you're just noticing and reporting concerns so trained professionals can investigate. The training was implemented across Georgia and eventually in 17 other states. Over 50,000 bus drivers completed the program. Within 3 years, it led to 284 documented cases where bus drivers identified and reported suspected child abuse, resulting in investigations and multiple children being removed from dangerous situations. Linda Harris changed our profession, said Thomas Anderson, executive director of the National School Transportation Association. She showed that bus drivers aren't just transporters, we're observers and protectors. We spend significant time with children, and we have a responsibility to notice when they're in trouble and get them help. Linda's advocacy has created systems that protect vulnerable kids who might otherwise be invisible. Linda continued driving her bus. She loved the work and the kids, but also devoted time to training other drivers and advocating for better child protection systems in schools and transportation. I think about how close I came to not pulling over that morning, Linda told an interviewer. I saw Jordan's injuries in my mirror. I could have told myself I'd misunderstood what I saw. I could have decided to wait and observe more before acting. I could have convinced myself it wasn't my business. But I didn't. I trusted my training and my instincts. I pulled over immediately and got Jordan help. That split-second decision to act instead of hesitate made all the difference for him. When Jordan turned 12, 6 years after Linda had rescued him from the bus, he made a decision. He wanted to share his story publicly. He wanted to use his experience to help other abused children and to support Linda's advocacy work. With his therapist's support and his foster parents' permission, they'd adopted him 2 years earlier, making him legally Jordan Mitchell. Jordan wrote an article for a youth advocacy magazine titled, "The Bus Driver Who Saved Me by Looking in Her Mirror." The article told his story, years of abuse by his father, multiple adults who'd noticed but hadn't reported, showing his injuries to Marcus on the bus that morning, Linda seeing them in her mirror, and immediately acting to protect him. "I was so scared when Ms. Linda pulled over the bus," Jordan wrote. "I knew she'd seen my back. I knew I'd be in huge trouble with my dad. But then Ms. Linda talked to me privately. She was so kind. She believed me right away. She promised I'd be safe, and she kept that promise. The police came. They didn't send me home. They protected me, and I never had to live with my dad again." Jordan described his recovery, the nightmares, the therapy, the slow process of learning to trust adults again, the loving foster family who'd eventually adopted him. "I'm happy now. I feel safe. I have parents who take care of me without hurting me. I have friends. I like school. I can just be a kid. That's because Ms. Linda noticed and acted." The article ended with a message to other abused children and to adults. "If you're a kid being hurt at home, please tell someone. I know it's scary. I was too scared to tell for a long time, but there are adults who will help you. Teachers, counselors, doctors, bus drivers. There are people who will believe you and protect you. And if you're an adult who sees signs that a kid might be being hurt, please report it. Don't ignore it. Don't wait. Report it right away. You could save a life like Ms. Linda saved mine." The article went viral. Thousands of abuse survivors commented with their own stories. Many thanked Jordan for giving them courage to speak about their experiences or to seek help if they were currently being abused. Jordan also began speaking at Linda's training sessions for bus drivers and school staff, providing the survivor perspective that made the training deeply personal. "I want bus drivers to understand what it's like to be the kid on their bus who's hiding abuse," Jordan told an audience of 200 bus drivers. "You might think kids would tell someone if they're being hurt, but I couldn't tell. My dad threatened me. He said no one would believe me. He said I'd be taken somewhere worse. I was too scared to ask for help directly, but I was hoping someone would notice. When Miss Linda saw my injuries in her mirror and pulled over immediately, I was terrified but also relieved. Finally someone saw me. Finally someone cared enough to do something." He described what it felt like to be a terrified 6-year-old, desperate for help but unable to ask for it directly. "Adults at my school noticed things. The nurse saw my bruises. My teacher saw me flinching. The counselor noticed I was sad, but no one reported it, so the abuse kept happening. Then one morning, Miss Linda just happened to glance in her mirror at the right moment. She saw what I'd shown Marcus, and unlike all those other adults, she acted immediately. She didn't wait. She didn't second guess. She pulled over and called for help right away. That's what saved me. Immediate action." Jordan's presence at training sessions transformed them. Bus drivers saw not just statistics or protocols, but a real person, articulate, intelligent, thriving, who had suffered years of abuse that multiple adults had missed. It made the training urgent and personal. "When Jordan speaks, you can see it click for people," Linda observed. "They realize this isn't abstract. This is about real children on their buses right now who might be suffering. Every driver in that room is thinking, I never want to miss the next Jordan." 10 years after Linda pulled over bus 47 and called for help, the impact of that one observation continued spreading in ways she'd never imagined. The training program she'd helped develop had been completed by over 150,000 bus drivers, monitors, and transportation staff across 34 states. It had led to 1,447 documented cases where transportation workers identified and reported suspected child abuse, resulting in investigations and hundreds of children being removed from dangerous situations. One particularly moving case involved a bus driver in Ohio who'd noticed a 7-year-old girl consistently wearing long sleeves and pants even in hot weather. The driver, who'd taken Linda's training, recognized this as a potential red flag for hiding injuries. She engaged the girl in conversation over several days, built trust, and eventually the girl disclosed being beaten by her stepmother. The driver reported immediately. Investigation confirmed ongoing abuse, and the girl was removed to safety. That driver saved that child because she'd been trained to recognize concerning patterns and knew to act on them, Linda said when she heard the story. That's what this training does. It gives transportation workers tools to recognize abuse and permission to trust their instincts and report. Jordan's advocacy had also created ripples. Now 16 and a confident, well-adjusted teenager, Jordan worked with several child abuse prevention organizations. He spoke at schools about recognizing abuse and seeking help. He mentored younger abuse survivors. He consulted on programs designed to support traumatized children. Jordan's transformed his trauma into purpose, Dr. Foster told Linda during a check-in about Jordan's well-being. That's a sign of profound healing. He's integrated his experience into his identity in a healthy way. It's part of who he is, but it doesn't define him entirely. He's a survivor, but he's also a student, an athlete, a friend, a son to Susan and James. He's built a full life. By the time Jordan graduated high school at 18, he'd become a recognized voice in child protection advocacy. He'd spoken at dozens of trainings and conferences, been interviewed by major media outlets, and inspired countless survivors to seek help or share their own stories. "I'm going to study social work in college," Jordan told Linda when she attended his graduation. "I want to help abused kids the way people helped me. I want to be the person who believes them, protects them, and helps them heal." Linda hugged him, overcome with emotion. "10 years ago, you were a terrified little boy showing someone your injuries on my bus. Now look at you. You're strong, confident, and you're going to change so many lives. I'm so proud of you, Jordan. I wouldn't be here without you," Jordan said. "You gave me my life back. Everything I have now, my family, my friends, my future, it all exists because you looked in your mirror at the right moment and chose to act. Thank you, Miss Linda, for seeing me, for protecting me, for giving me a chance to build a good life." 15 years after that Wednesday morning on Bus 47, Linda Harris was 67 years old and approaching retirement from driving school buses. But she wasn't retiring from advocacy. She'd spent 15 years training transportation workers, speaking at conferences, consulting on child protection programs, and advocating for better systems to identify and protect abused children. She'd trained over 200,000 people directly or indirectly through certified instructors who'd learned her curriculum. Jordan Wright Mitchell was 21, in his senior year of college studying social work, and working part-time for a child advocacy center providing support to abuse victims, navigating the legal system. Together they'd become a powerful team, the bus driver who'd saved a child and the child who'd grown into an advocate. Their story had become famous in child protection circles and had inspired countless people to pay more attention to the children in their lives. "Linda and Jordan represent what's possible when adults choose to notice and act," said Dr. Michael Chen, director of the National Child Protection Training Center. Linda saw concerning signs and immediately intervened. Jordan was given safety and support to heal. Now both are using their experience to protect other children. That's transformative impact. But Linda and Jordan knew the work was far from finished. Child abuse remained pervasive, affecting millions of children annually, often hidden behind closed doors, with many cases never identified or reported. "We've made progress," Linda told a Senate committee hearing on child protection. "Transportation workers are better trained. Reporting has increased. More children are being identified and protected. But we still have so far to go. Not every state requires child abuse training for school staff. Not every school has adequate resources to respond to reports. Not every child who needs help gets it. We need federal standards, federal funding, and a comprehensive national strategy for protecting children." Jordan testified alongside her. "I was lucky. Miss Linda noticed me and acted immediately. But how many children right now are being abused and no adults are noticing? Or adults are noticing but not reporting? Every day we delay implementing comprehensive abuse recognition training nationwide. More children suffer. We can't accept that." Their testimony contributed to the Child Protection Modernization Act, which provided federal funding for states to implement mandatory abuse recognition training for all school personnel including transportation workers, increased funding for child protective services, and established national reporting standards. But the constant focus on child abuse took an emotional toll on both Linda and Jordan. Linda heard story after story of abuse in her training work.
Jordan had to repeatedly relive his own trauma by sharing it publicly. "I'm grateful I can use my experience to help others," Jordan told his therapist during a particularly difficult week. "But it's exhausting telling my story over and over. Each time I relive being 6 years old, terrified and in pain. Sometimes I wonder if the advocacy work is worth the psychological cost." His therapist helped him understand that his feelings were valid and that he needed to set boundaries. "You're allowed to take breaks from advocacy. You're allowed to say no to speaking engagements. Your first responsibility is to yourself, to your healing and well-being. The advocacy work is meaningful, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your mental health." Jordan started being more selective about speaking engagements, taking months off to focus on school and his personal life. He traveled, spent time with friends, pursued hobbies unrelated to trauma work. He found balance between using his story to help others and living a life not defined solely by past abuse. Linda experienced similar burnout. After 15 years of intensive advocacy work on top of driving her bus, she was exhausted. "I thought saving Jordan would be one moment in my career," Linda told her husband Robert. "Instead, it's become my whole life. I'm grateful for the impact we're having, but I'm also tired. I miss the simplicity of just driving kids to school without also running a national training program." Robert encouraged her to delegate responsibilities. "You've built something important, but you don't have to personally do everything. Train other trainers. Create systems that don't depend entirely on you. That's how movements sustain themselves beyond their founders." Linda took that advice. She hired staff to manage the training program. She certified instructors who could deliver the curriculum without requiring her personal presence. She built organizational capacity that would allow the work to continue when she retired from active involvement. "I'm learning that sustainable advocacy requires self-care," Linda told a group of younger advocates. "You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourselves. Set boundaries. Don't try to save every child personally. Build systems that protect children collectively." As Linda approached retirement and Jordan began his professional career, they focused on ensuring their work would continue beyond their direct involvement. Linda developed a master trainer program, certifying transportation professionals who could deliver child abuse recognition training without requiring her participation. Within 3 years, over 150 certified trainers were teaching the curriculum across the country. "I can't personally train every bus driver in America," Linda told her trainees, "but you can. Each of you can reach thousands of drivers. That's how movements scale, through multiplication of effort." Jordan worked with several organizations to create survivor leadership programs that supported abuse survivors in becoming advocates and peer mentors. "Not every survivor wants to be public about their experience, and that's okay," Jordan told a group of newer advocates. "But for those who do, we need to support them with therapy, boundaries, and realistic expectations." Advocacy work is meaningful, but can also be re-traumatizing if not approached carefully. The next generation brought fresh perspectives and innovations. They expanded focus beyond just recognition to prevention, addressing root causes like parental stress, poverty, substance abuse, and lack of support systems that increased abuse risk. "Linda and Jordan taught us to recognize abuse when it's happening," said Maya Rodriguez, who became director of the training program Linda had created. "But we also need to prevent abuse from happening in the first place. That means supporting struggling families, providing mental health resources, addressing systemic issues. Prevention is better than intervention." 20 years after Linda glanced in her rearview mirror and saw Jordan's injuries, she and Jordan were jointly awarded the National Child Protection Award for their work transforming how school transportation personnel recognize and respond to child abuse. At the ceremony, Linda was 72 and retired from bus driving, but still active in advocacy. Jordan was 26, working as a clinical social worker, specializing in child trauma. 20 years ago, the award presenter said, Linda Harris was driving her school bus route when she noticed something in her rearview mirror, a 6-year-old boy showing another child marks on his back. Linda immediately pulled over, called for help, and stayed with that child until he was safe. That child was Jordan Wright, who was being severely abused by his father. Linda's observation and immediate action saved Jordan's life. The presenter turned to Jordan, and Jordan, despite enduring years of horrific abuse, has used his voice to educate thousands about recognizing child abuse and the importance of immediate reporting. Together, Linda and Jordan have trained over 300,000 school transportation personnel, leading to hundreds of abused children being identified and protected. Their work has fundamentally changed how schools approach child safety. After the ceremony, reporters asked the inevitable questions about being heroes. Jordan had become skilled at answering. "Miss Linda is my hero because she looked in her mirror, saw something wrong, and acted immediately without hesitation. But she'd tell you she was just doing her job. What I want people to understand is that protecting children should be everyone's job. Every adult who interacts with children has opportunities to notice when something's wrong. The question is whether they act on what they notice. Miss Linda acted. That's what saved me." Privately, Away from cameras and speeches, Linda and Jordan reflected on 20 years since that Wednesday morning. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't looked in my mirror at that exact moment? Linda asked Jordan over dinner, after the ceremony. Jordan nodded. All the time. If you'd been looking at the road, if you'd been distracted, if I'd pulled my shirt down 2 seconds earlier, you wouldn't have seen. I would have gone home that day. My dad would have beaten me for showing someone my injuries. The abuse would have continued. I probably wouldn't have survived much longer. He looked at Linda seriously. Your one glance in a mirror at the right moment changed the entire trajectory of my life. I went from being a terrified, abused child to being safe, loved, and able to build a good life. That's because of you, Miss Linda. Linda's eyes filled with tears. And you've taken that second chance and used it to protect hundreds of other children. The training programs, the advocacy, the policy changes, they've all led to more children being noticed and rescued. That's your legacy, Jordan. Our legacy, Jordan corrected. We did this together. Your training gives transportation workers the tools to recognize abuse. My story gives them the motivation to use those tools. Together, we've created something that will continue protecting children long after we're both gone. 25 years after Linda pulled over bus 47, the ripples from that one observation continued spreading in profound ways. The training program had reached over 500,000 transportation workers across all 50 states and had been adapted for international use in Canada, the UK, and Australia. It had led to over 5,000 documented cases where transportation workers identified and reported suspected child abuse. But beyond the documented cases were countless others harder to measure. How many potential abusers had been deterred because they knew bus drivers were trained observers? How many children had been protected because the adults around them were more vigilant? The preventative impact was impossible to quantify but likely enormous. The program had also inspired similar initiatives in other sectors. Coaches, daycare workers, after-school program staff, and others who worked with children were implementing training based on Linda and Jordan's model. Linda and Jordan showed that ordinary citizens in their regular jobs can be trained to recognize and respond to child abuse, said Dr. Patricia Morrison, director of the National Center for Child Protection. That insight has transformed how we approach child safety, moving from depending entirely on social workers and law enforcement to empowering everyone who interacts with children to be observers and protectors. Jordan had completed his Master of Social Work and was working as a therapist specializing in child trauma survivors. He brought both professional training and lived experience to his work. I understand my clients in ways therapists who haven't experienced abuse can't, Jordan told colleagues. I know what it feels like to be trapped, terrified, and hopeless. I know what it's like to be rescued and face the long path of healing. That gives me credibility and empathy. But I'm careful not to let my experience overshadow professional judgment. Every client's journey is unique. Linda, now 77 and long retired from driving but still occasionally speaking at trainings, watched with pride as the work she and Jordan had started continued growing and evolving under new leadership. 25 years ago I looked in a mirror and saw a child in trouble, Linda told her final keynote speech before fully retiring from public speaking. I made a split-second decision to pull over and call for help. That one decision changed 2 lives, Jordan's and mine. But it also created a movement that has protected thousands of children over 2.5 decades. She looked at the audience of transportation workers. Every one of you has mirrors on your buses. Use them not just for traffic safety but for child safety. Watch your passengers. Notice when something seems wrong. And when you see concerning signs, act immediately. Don't hesitate. Don't second guess. Pull over and call for help. You might save a life. And that life might belong to someone who goes on to save many others. That's legacy. That's what one moment of paying attention can become. Linda Harris passed away peacefully at age 82, 27 years after she'd pulled over her school bus and saved Jordan Wright's life. Her obituary noted her 43 years driving school buses and her transformative work creating child abuse recognition training that had protected thousands of children. Her memorial service was attended by hundreds, fellow bus drivers, transportation administrators, child protection advocates, survivors she'd helped through her training programs, and Jordan Mitchell, now 33 and a clinical director at a trauma treatment center. Jordan gave the eulogy, his voice steady despite profound grief. 27 years ago, I was a 6-year-old boy being severely abused by my father. Multiple adults had noticed concerning signs but hadn't reported them, so the abuse continued. Then one Wednesday morning, I showed another student my injuries on Miss Linda's bus. She happened to glance in her rearview mirror at exactly the right moment. She saw what I'd shown Marcus, and unlike all those other adults who'd noticed and done nothing, Miss Linda acted immediately. He looked at the crowd. She pulled over the bus. She called for help. She spoke to me privately and believed me when I disclosed abuse. She stayed with me until police arrived. She protected me. That immediate action, pulling over without hesitation, calling for help without second guessing, saved my life. If she'd waited, if she'd convinced herself she'd misunderstood, if she'd decided it wasn't her business, I would have gone home that day and been beaten again. I might not have survived. Jordan's voice grew emotional. But Miss Linda didn't just save me that one time. She spent the next 27 years creating systems to ensure other children wouldn't be missed the way I almost was. She trained hundreds of thousands of transportation workers. She advocated for policy changes. She made child protection a central part of school transportation culture. Because of her work, thousands of abused children have been identified and rescued by bus drivers and monitors who knew what to look for and had the courage to act. He paused. Ms. Linda used to say she was just a bus driver doing her job, but she was so much more. She was an observer who paid attention. She was a protector who acted immediately when she saw a child in danger. She was an advocate who built systems to help others recognize and respond to abuse. She was a hero who saved my life and countless others. Jordan looked at Linda's casket. Thank you, Ms. Linda, for looking in your mirror 27 years ago, for pulling over immediately, for believing me, for protecting me, for giving me a life I never thought I'd have, for being the person who noticed when everyone else looked away. You changed my life completely. And then you changed thousands of other lives by teaching people to do what you did. Pay attention and act. That's legacy. That's love. That's everything. After the service, survivors whose rescues had been connected to Linda's training, either because she'd personally saved them, or because transportation workers trained in her methods had identified their abuse, gathered to share memories. I was 9 when my bus driver noticed I was wearing long sleeves in summer and had visible bruises, said Marcus Johnson, now 23. She'd taken Miss Linda's training. She knew those were red flags. She reported her concerns. Investigation revealed I was being abused by my stepfather. I was removed and placed in a safe home. I'm alive and thriving because a bus driver who'd been trained by Miss Linda paid attention and acted. Similar stories were shared by dozens of survivors. Linda's training had created a ripple effect across decades, with each trained transportation worker potentially saving multiple lives over their career. Jordan established the Linda Harris Memorial Fund to continue supporting child abuse recognition training for transportation workers and to provide scholarships for survivors pursuing careers in child protection, social work, or related fields. Miss Linda gave me my life and my career, Jordan told donors at the fund's launch. Now we're going to ensure her work continues indefinitely. Every bus driver trained through this fund, every survivor supported in pursuing protective careers, every child saved because a transportation worker noticed abuse, that's Miss Linda's legacy living on. The fund raised over $3 million in its first year, ensuring the training programs Linda had created would continue reaching new generations of transportation workers. Jordan continued his clinical work and occasional advocacy, now carrying forward the mission he and Linda had built together. At age 35, he reflected on 29 years since Linda had saved him. I shouldn't be here, Jordan told a group of young survivors he was mentoring. Statistically, children who experience the level of abuse I did often don't survive or struggle significantly into adulthood. But I was rescued because one bus driver looked in her mirror at the right moment and chose to act immediately. I've spent 29 years since then living the life Miss Linda gave me, a life dedicated to ensuring other children get the same chance I got. He looked at the young people, all survivors working toward healing. Miss Linda taught me that one person paying attention can change everything. She paid attention to me. Now I pay attention to the children I treat clinically, and the survivors I mentor. You can pay attention too to yourselves as you heal, to other survivors who need support, to vulnerable children you might encounter. That attention, that caring, that willingness to act when you see something wrong, that's how we protect people.
29 years. One glance in a rearview mirror. One split-second decision to pull over. One bus driver who chose to act immediately rather than hesitate. Thousands of lives changed. A movement created. A legacy that would continue protecting children long after Linda Harris was gone. One person paying attention. One child who was seen. One moment that changed everything. That was enough. More than enough. Everything. This story is dedicated to every school bus driver, monitor, and transportation worker who pays attention to the children they transport, who notices when something seems wrong, and who has the courage to report concerns immediately. Your vigilance saves lives. And to every child experiencing abuse, you deserve to be safe, you deserve to be believed, and there are adults who will help you if they notice what's happening. You are not alone.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.